Good morning, everyone. I see lots of people typing in their name in the chat box. Let's keep doing that. We'll wait a couple more minutes and see if we can get a few more people signed in before we go ahead and start this morning. All right, I think we'll go ahead and just get started. We've got about over 40 people online now. Good morning, everyone. It's kind of a nice, cold, snowy day, so I'm sure we're all happy to be home in our warm houses. I'm having some technical issues, so I'm going to stay off camera. And Joan, if I drop off suddenly, you might have to pick up the ball.
Okay, thanks for the heads up.
Yeah. All right, so has everybody had a chance hopefully to look over the minutes that were sent in the email? Any questions or comments or additions from minutes from last month?
Chair, if you don't mind.
Actually, we have a different item. Yeah.
Yeah, if we could go to the item ahead, which is introduction of new reps and attendees. And I'd like to say we got a few new attendees that typically haven't come before. And I think we have a new rep from Federal Heights. I don't know if Mayor Pro Tem Harold Thomas is on or not. I know we have a few new people. If you wouldn't mind letting them take a minute and tell us who they are. I'm hoping some of the congressional leaders reps are here as well.
Yeah, sure. So I do see, I think Celeste I saw is on there from Federal Heights. And then any of the other new reps that are here or attendees. I know that I've invited some new people as well. Celeste, are you the new representative for Federal Heights? I think you were on the AdCog call last night.
No, I'm the new alternate.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry, I'm the new alternate, and Mayor Pro Tem Thomas is the new rep. I've been having some trouble with my scheduling, but I ended up with a snow day today, so I was able to come.
Well, welcome. Thank you, Celeste.
Thank you.
We also have Senator Hickenlooper's regional representative, Max Haynes. Max, if you want to introduce yourself, and then Mike Washington from Senator Bennett's office.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I am the new regional representative for Senator Hickenlooper as Colorado staff, particularly in the greater Denver area. So it's nice to meet you all. I'll leave my contact information in the chat, and thank you for allowing me to be here. Good morning.
Thank you, Max.
And Mike, are you on?
Hi, yes, I'm on. I'm Mike Washington. I am Senator Bennett's Director of Denver Metro Area Outreach, as well as Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Thanks for having me here. I know a lot of my, I guess, former colleagues from RTD, including board members. I saw that Shelley Cook's in, and I also saw, sorry about my daughter there, Chris Quinn and a couple of other friends. Good to see you guys, or I guess at least see your names anyway.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you. And I see Jeremy Rodriguez is online.
That's great.
He's always here.
Good morning,
Yeah.
everybody.
And then I see, hi, Jeremy, glad to see you. We wish we were seeing you in person.
Sorry about that. I can't do that today. I didn't do my hair.
And also Craig Eichner from Tel Energy is on for Smart Commute and NATA. He is replacing Kristen Gibson, who for many years was our XL Energy representative to this group. Craig, if you want to say something, that'd be great.
Hi, everybody. I just had to change my name on my picture there. I have my wife's account on for some reason. Hi, nice to meet everybody. Yes, thanks for inviting me in. Yes, I'm replacing Preston to do the best of my abilities because he was so good in this role. I come from XL Energy's Boulder County region, so I'm just hopping over to the east a little bit. I also have been on the board of directors for Commuting Solutions now for a couple of years, chaired the board last year. And so I'm happy to be here in both capacities, really to see how another TMO works and the other issues that you folks deal with. And now, of course, you're within my professional region as well. So it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Craig. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Karen, were there any other new attendees or
Nope.
reps that you were waiting for?
I don't think so. That's who I had on the list. So thanks very much, Chair, for letting us do that. And now I'm not going to interrupt you again. Thank you.
No, that's okay. I didn't have that on my agenda item, so that's perfect. I'll look at the one on the screen. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the meeting minutes from January 28th. Any questions or additions to that anyone has? I don't see any hands up, so if we can get a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved, Malcolm Fleming.
Second, Anita Seitz.
Perfect. We have a motion and a second. I don't remember, do we just do all in favor, everyone say yes, or how do we do these ones?
You know, at the Transportation Commission, I just ask if there's anyone who wants to abstain or anyone who's in opposition. And if nobody answers, then we just call it as unanimous approval. That might
Okay.
be easier with a group this large.
Yeah, perfect. All right, if there are no issues, then we will go ahead and accept the minutes from last month. I don't see any hands up. Okay, moving on, we'll go ahead and get an update from Smart Commute from Karen, Carson, and Tammy.
Thanks a lot, Chair. We're going to keep it brief. We're as busy as anyone else, I'm sure, but we want to tell you about 3 grants that we're pursuing. We're pursuing a Can Do Colorado e-bike grant program, and it's really a companion piece to the Flex Ride grant that we have. In our Flex Ride, we have talked about not just the transit component, but multimodal as well. And we are partnering with Can Do Colorado e-bike program to purchase some loaner to owner e-bikes for workforce that's within 10 miles of the Flex Ride service area at 144th and I-25. And our grant is for Adams County and Brumfield County. And we are submitting that, we submitted that grant yesterday. And hopefully we'll be able to do a 3-phase of that grant and roll out about 30 e-books for workers to use as a first last mile opportunity to get to essential workplaces at 144th and I-25. That's exciting for us. We also are looking at a telework grant. There's still some money in that program through CDOT. And we are engaging a wellness and ergonomics expert who will help us with 3 15-minute videos, one targeted on ergonomics for teleworkers, one video for physical health targeted for teleworkers, and one for mental health targeted to teleworkers. And we're working on a partnership right now that I'm hoping will play out in the next couple of days. And then we're also pursuing the E470 safety grant. We went after one of those last year. We weren't successful in it. And the component of that grant last year was community outreach at all the outreach events throughout the jurisdictions that are part of NATA, the 13 jurisdictions that are part of NATA. And we didn't get that grant, and I'm kind of glad we didn't, because there was no way we would have been able to do that without the public outreach component. So we're doing that one. We're really excited to be working on these grants. As I said to my board yesterday, not just the opportunity to get these grants and bring in more programming, but the opportunity to have the experience of writing grants, collaborating as a team to make this work. As you know, the 5 of us have been together at Smart Commute for quite a long time and work very well together. And I think we're a well-oiled team. So really excited to pursue those grants. I'm going to turn it over now to Carson, who's going to talk about Bike to Work Day.
Sure. So we just heard from our DRCOG colleagues at Way to Go that Bike to Work Day will be postponed again this year to try to accommodate for some in-person breakfast stations and some of those festivities that go along around that. It'll be September 22nd. This is semi-public knowledge. They're going to release a press release, but we felt it's important for all of you to know early, just to postpone your planning around that from each jurisdiction. Smart Commute is going to run a series of summer bike challenge campaigns throughout each month of the summer, because we really believe that people like to bike from April through September, and starting a bike challenge all the way in late September may not capitalize on that good weather we have here. So that's our plan. More to come on that, and I'll pass it over to my colleague Tammy.
Morning, everyone. We just want to give you a brief rundown on some presentations and webinars we have planned for our Smart Commute group. First off, we're going to have Ryan Sorensen give us a brief overview of the Colorado 7 corridor, which you'll hear today at the end of today's meeting. We're going to have Kyle with McWinney give us an overview on the new baseline development going in up at Highway 7. Our member Pedro Costa will give us a update on climate change, sustainability, and resilience. We're going to do a presentation on the Front Range passenger rail, as you know, is a hot topic and constantly on the move here. We're looking at doing the new regulation for the employee trip reduction program that the Air Quality Control Council and RAC are working on, doing some outreach to that to the Broomfield Chamber and our constituents at AC Rep, and doing some a video on tips on how to host a successful virtual meeting. We saw some information on that, and as we know, that's super helpful for everybody. Thanks, and I will pass that back over to Jessica, I think.
Perfect. Thanks, Tammy. Thanks, Carson. Thanks, Karen. Okay, so it looks like we are moving along to the RTD directors reports, and I did see Eric, Shelley, Troy, and Vince are online with us this morning. Who would like to start that conversation?
Jessica, good morning. It looks like we have a pretty full and important agenda following with the inline update. So I think that's where many of us would like to spend our time. So I don't have really anything beyond the inputs and your questions on that, but there are 3 other colleagues here. I'd ask if they have anything beyond those to add, because I certainly don't at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Troy.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Vince, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I'll concur with Troy. You guys have an agenda item coming up. If you need any of our input or you have questions for us on those things, we're here and happy to give our input. One thing I think is important that we passed on Tuesday night was an equitable transit-oriented development policy. So relates to RTD-owned properties that are ripe for TOD and has affordable housing components and parking flexibility and all kinds of things that hopefully will be a good thing moving forward as these properties can hopefully get developed in the future. And that's all I have for now. Thanks.
Thank you. And I see Shelley says nothing to add right now. Eric, anything from you?
No, I wouldn't add too much more. I actually thank you, Troy, for bringing, sorry, Vince, for bringing up the equitable housing. That was a great thing that we passed the other night. I think it's very exciting that we'll be adding some flexibility, and we've already seen some interest. Director Geisinger and myself had a meeting with the town of Superior this past week, and already there's some things in motion and some great ideas. Like my fellow directors, just looking forward to hearing the feedback, and great agenda today, and good to be back with y'all here. So thank you for having us.
Jessica, one other thing
Yeah.
before we jump into the meat of the discussion, we did have a vote unanimously to extend the collective bargaining unit with our local unions. It's just an extension for a year, but kudos to our senior management staff, especially our CEO, in getting that done. So we're at a place of stability for another year as we work through the COVID and all kinds of odd twists that we've all been dealing with in our respective worlds. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, that's good information. Thanks, Troy. Okay, so let's just go ahead and jump in. And so as I'm sitting here, I'm receiving rider alerts and cancellations on the N line. I just got another one from the East Lake Station down to Union Station. And so I think that is the meat of what this conversation is, because as you guys are aware, there have been a lot of cancellations over the last month or so. And so it kind of ties into the rest of the items on that, in those bulleted items, the pilot program and then the fare zones. And so our pilot program is set to end in a month, and a lot of that was dependent on ridership, which we wouldn't be able to get this year with COVID. But on top of that, the reliability piece, I fear with so many cancellations constantly happening, and a day like today especially, if we don't want people on the road and we're trying to tell people that the N line is more reliable, but then there's canceled trips constantly happening, people aren't going to go there, and it's not going to happen with ridership. So I just wonder, how are we going to convince people, number one, to ride the train, and number two, to rely on the train as transportation as an option, and then number three, with the fare program expiring, that's just going to push people out of riding the system again, especially on those last two stops from North Glen. Their one station down would become the regional rate, which is $5.25 versus the $3 now. And then our final current end of the station at East Lake, also a regional fare. And so I see less people taking the train knowing that it's going to go up an additional $2.25 per one way. And so I just want to know what the plan is for helping to get this N line up and going during a pandemic, but moving forward, and what the possibilities are of extending that pilot program. And even around the region, I know that's been a conversation with the fares. And so I guess I'll leave it there. There's
Chair,
slides up.
we've put the PowerPoint. Yeah, we put the PowerPoint slides up from the meeting on Tuesday, and thought we might just frame the problem as you're talking about it. And what the chair is referring to is the number of times that we've in the recent couple of weeks have received N-line problems. So maybe Vince or Henry or someone can kind of walk us through these slides, but what we wanted to show was what the board saw, the reason for some of these outages that we've had, or delays, or interruptions to service, to kind of frame what's happening with the N line compared to the A line and the G line. So Vince, are you prepared to talk about this, or do we want to turn it over to Henry if he's still with us?
I'm happy to give my perspective and what I've heard from staff, and if Henry's still on, he can jump in at any point in time. So the slide you're looking at now talks about the N line and the fact that RTD operates the N line, whereas the other commuter rail lines, the Eagle lines, are run by DTO, Denver Transit Operators, and RTD is not involved in that, in the operation. So we're responsible for everything, you know, running these trains and dispatching trains and all of that. So there's a difference there in terms of responsibilities for system issues. And if there's a next slide, you can move on. WebTech. So this is the weak, often the weak link in the chain is the company that the software company that does our positive train control and other systems, on and off issues, typically when there's an upgrade or a reboot of the system, we have some kind of cascading effects. WebTech has been pretty responsive, from my understanding, that they're on site constantly when there are issues, and working through the software issues to get them done. My understanding is, you know, with the Endline over the last month or so, the problems have been threefold. They've been either WebTech software issues, they've been operator shortages, no operators to drive a train, and they've been DTO issues down toward Union Station, you know, switches and things like that. The DTO is responsible for, but you know, as everything comes to a head at Union Station and everybody converges, and if there's one issue that is a DTO issue, it's going to affect us as well, the end line as well, and that's been an issue going on. And I see Henry's here, so Henry, if there's any chance you can give an update on what staff and everybody's doing to address some of these issues and our hopes that it's going to improve.
And Vince, what is a DTO? We have a question.
DTO is a Denver Transit Operators. You've heard of DTP, Denver Transit Partners, the ones who built the system. Now DTO operates the system. Just a new acronym to throw out there. And I don't know if Henry's on or not, but if not, we can move on to the next.
I am on.
Okay, Henry.
And Director Busick, I think you covered it very well. So the DTP is the contractor that we have, and they've got several entities, and one of those is DTO, and they're the operator. So they provide us the equipment, and so if they don't provide us the equipment, or they've got some issues at every station, that slows us down. So Director Busick got it right. You got the DTP/DTO interface. You've got operator issues, and then we've got WebTech. And WebTech has committed to make this one of their top priorities within their firm. We've had some meetings with them, with their senior executives back in February 12th. And they're on site right now working through some of these issues. So we're making progress. And I had to remind everybody, we're just in month 4 of operations. So if you think back to where we were with month 4 with Denver Transit Partners, they were still trying to get everything under control. So we are making progress. We've put a lot of extra resources into it. Go ahead, Director Busick.
Thanks, Henry. And if there's another slide, you can go to the next slide. This talks about quiet zones. So, you know, the quiet zones means we don't have to blow our horns at the intersections, provided everything's running smoothly. And that typically relates to the positive train control system, one of the biggest safety systems that the trains have. If for some reason WebTech, the software company, our PTC is not operating, the trains are required to blow their horns at the intersections. So that's one of the required reasons they'd have to blow their horns. They can also do it, you know, if they see a safety issue or things like that. But recently, particularly on, and Director Cook can probably talk about it, on the G line that has a lot more crossings than the N line has, there have been a lot of issues with the neighborhoods being upset about the horns blowing at 3:30 in the morning. So that's when and why the horns will sound, even though we have quiet zones established. Next slide. So our performance metrics is service availability, that means how many do we have trains out there running? I mean, and so the service availability has been pretty good. On time performance, and if there's a slide in here coming up, there might be compared to the Eagle project, it hasn't been as good, I don't think, and something we need to improve upon. And as you can see, the numbers have been getting better over time. And a lot of it has to do with the newness of the system, newness of the operators, and the people, in the control center dispatching and making sure things are running smoothly. So as those things start to click and mesh together better, I think we're going to hopefully going to continue to see on-time performance increase. With regard to the operator stuff, no train because of operator shortage. My understanding is we've got another class of operators happening right now that should be coming out of their training and getting on the trains fairly soon. So maybe that'll help with some of those drop runs that relate to lack of operators. So hopefully that's being addressed as well. Next slide, please. So here's the performance metrics for the Eagle projects, the A, B, and G lines, and you can see the on-time performance is quite significantly better. But remember, they've been running a lot longer than the N line, and I understand, as the chair indicates, it's really hard when you have these issues upon startup of a line that people are going to get disappointed and realize these things aren't reliable. So we're working really hard to get this resolved and get it resolved quickly so we don't have that issue, but we'll keep at it. Next slide, please. Or is that it? Okay. So these are the issues. So as you can see, the N line has had a number more days that had issues than the Eagle line, and considering the Eagle has 3 commuter rail lines and the N line is just 1. But as you can also see, issues are going down. Today, I guess another exception, we've got some things going on, and it's tough on a day when people really want to take transit when it's not available. So I think our general manager has said, I've heard her say, you're in transit, you're only as good as your last rush hour. And when we have an issue like this, people are going to remember it. So we're going to work really hard to resolve these issues. Next slide, please. We've got some quiet zone meetings coming up. The links to the meetings are on the RTD website. These are listening sessions to hear from residents and so forth, arguably about the quiet zones and the horns blasting and things like that. But as you all know, we'll be talking probably about everything. So again, go to the RTD website, participate, get this out to your constituents and other stakeholders. Would be really good to hear about what's going on. I haven't heard a lot about the horns on the N line. As I said, we don't have nearly as many crossings as the other lines, though. But it's going to be good to hear about what people are thinking. So, next slide, if there is one. Oh, okay. Do you want me to talk about this as well?
I hope somebody talks about it.
Well, maybe I'll talk about it since, or Henry, you can, if you want to talk about it.
Well, no, I don't want to talk about this one. I just back on this morning for the N line. So it looks like, because I got my internal alert, it looks like we were short of an operator this morning. So they had to cancel a couple of the trips. So it was an operator shortage, what caused the delay, the lack of a couple of runs today. So I just wanted to share that with the group. But as far as the pilot fare program, I think that's probably from the board members, and I'm going to be stepping off in just a minute too.
So maybe we'll stop here before we talk about that and see if there's questions about the actual
Right.
performance. It looks like Anita had a question as well.
So it might be a good transition question to the next topic. Recognizing that there's been some performance issues, and regardless of whether they're not RTD's responsibility or not, I'm wondering if there's fidelity in the pilot of the fare the reduced fare. If there's a goal of really understanding if a reduced fare increases ridership, right? Perhaps we should extend the period so we can have clean data. We don't have all of these other factors, such as that have impacted that. So I guess that's my push to perhaps see if that might be a reason to extend the fare study so we can get some good data on the efficacy of that reduced fare.
Yeah, good question. I'll get to that when we talk about the pilot fare program and its expiration. But if there's anyone else that has a question specifically about the end line, as long as Henry's still on, maybe we can take any of those now.
And so Karen and I have some questions as well, but looks like what is RTD doing about driver shortage?
So as I indicated, we've
So
got.
as Director Busick.
Go ahead, Henry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
I was
Henry.
going to say, just as Director Busick pointed out, that we do have classes underway right now, so we should have the next couple of weeks another class of operators out there on the system. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're hiring as fast as we can, and we're putting on the lines.
Okay, and so I guess I have questions around the communication of all of these canceled trips and delays, because they come through a little bit differently each day. And so the one I'm looking at right now with the canceled trip this morning at 7:44, again, which is a prime time if people were going to go to work downtown, it doesn't say anything about a driver shortage. And I know I've received several of those that say driver shortage or say technical issue. And then on top of that, if you're not signed up for rider alerts, you're not getting these alerts. And so where else can we see these things? I would like to share it on Facebook, but when I go to the RTD Facebook page, there's nothing about the cancellations. So I guess there's a lot of, even this public outreach meeting, if you have to go to RTD to get the information, is it also being pushed out on social media for you guys? So I feel like there's a lot of mixed messages and different messages coming through. And again, it doesn't really matter why there's a canceled trip or why there's a delay. After so many times of people trying to ride the train or trying to take the train versus driving, if it's not working, they're not going to continue to try. And so I think people don't want to hear anymore that, we're having this issue or that issue. They don't want to hear it. They just want the train to work. And so, Henry, you said we're in 4 months of operations, but we're really going on 6 months of the train being available. And so 6 months worth of unreliable service is not going to get us to the ridership that we want. And I can't explain it to the residents that call anymore. They don't want to hear about the software issue. They don't want to hear about the driver shortage. They just want the train to work. And so I don't know how we communicate with them anymore with why there's an issue. We had that same with RTP. The contractor was the problem. Now it's the software is the problem. I think people are just tired of the reasons why it's not working and they want it to work. So I guess I'm asking for help in how we get this out there, because I'm at a loss, I guess.
I fully understand where you're coming from, and it's frustrating from our side too. But I'll talk to the operating folks and the communication folks and see what we can do to get that information out there. And so I've actually got a meeting with the general manager right after this, and we'll bring that up as well.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments about the performance before we move into the pilot fare program? I don't see any hands up and no questions in the chat. So let's go ahead and move on to that. And so as we can see on the slide, the program is set to end March 27th. And so I know there's been a lot of conversation around the entire RTD region as the fares are different for local versus regional. And then with this program ending, as Anita mentioned as well, what is the plan for moving forward so we can get accurate data on whether or not the lower fare is what gets people to ride versus people just take it anyways? I guess there's no real data that we can use in this last 6 months because we're not operating under normal conditions.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, when we passed the promotional fair pilot program, we were not in the pandemic and had high hopes for it giving us a lot of information as well as helping people travel at a more reasonable cost. So the problem with the fair program and extending it is that these types of programs, specifically pilot programs, are strictly governed by our federal regulators, and we cannot extend this program for more than 6 months. It must end at the end of 6 months. If we wanted it to go longer, my understanding is we need to do an entire equity analysis about a fare reduction on this line, an equity analysis that would take a long time to complete and may or may not show that a reduction in fare is appropriate. So in terms of a pilot fare, it's a really technical animal that is strictly governed by our federal regulators. And so we don't have the ability to extend it, even though we may want to. I would want to, that's for sure. So there you go. The directors on this call fought very hard for this program and got it put in place, and we're excited about it. We had the help of State Representative Kyle Mullica to get this done, and now we're in a situation where it's great for those riding it now, but we're not going to be getting the data and information that we hoped we would get at the end of it. So that's where we are with that. I don't know if you have any more questions about it.
It looks like Shelley has her hand up. So.
Yeah,
ahead,
thank
Shelley.
you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple of things to quickly add. We have ridership data for the N line through December, and it's held right in there. It was 34,000 for the first partial month when there were free runs, and then has been 43, 44 since, literally neck and neck with the G line in that whole period. So, that's good news. I think it could do much better, obviously, if we didn't have the pandemic. And I'm interested too in what the effect of fares will be. I almost hesitate to mention this because I don't know much about it, but at the meeting, in her remarks, Deborah Johnson mentioned that on the 9th of March, we're going to be talking about, or she wants to commence what she's calling a growth ridership action plan. And I think it will be good to talk about fares generally and see how we can bring those down across the board in order to help bring people back into the system. So thank you, Madam Chair.
And Shelley, just for clarity, does the G line have any regional fares on it, or is it a local fare all the way?
No, it's local all the way.
Okay.
The W line has local all the way except for the end of line. I don't know if Director Sloan is on the line, but that's been a particular bone of contention for the folks in Golden since the start. So but the G line is all local.
Thank you. And it looks like we have a question from Phil as well. Would RTD be open to allowing a buy-up of the regional fare to keep the fares on the N line local? And I don't know if he wants to expand on that or.
Sure, I guess I would just say that, again, Phil Greenwald from the city of Longmont, and we do buy up our local fares here in Longmont so that the local buses in Longmont are free to the user, to the rider. I'm just wondering if RTD would be open to a similar type system that might buy up that regional difference in the fare and be able to keep those fares local. I mean, it would have to be, again, this group coming together and determining how that buy up works. But I was wondering, first of all, if RTD would be open to that. Thank you.
And Troy, I see your hand, and Julie.
We have to be open to any ideas. Well, I appreciate perhaps there is a way, but we can certainly run that up the flagpole. The one comment I wanted to make, with conversations that have been ongoing with the Accountability Committee for RTD, and even some discussions with our CEO and fellow board members, we're in realization of our fares being on the top end in the country. And that's a bit problematic. And I do believe that our leadership on the staff level is in recognition of that. And Deborah has been quoted of saying, you know, we're concerned about that. And so I would think, and please jump in, my other three board members, that is a topic of conversation in the short term as well. Just the overall issues. When you have one stop on the W line that's at a higher rate and two on the N line and others, it gets kind of confusing. It seems nearly punitive over a 1 or 2 or 4 mile difference. So, you know, I'd like to work to see what we can do about that, at least, just because our fare structure can be very confusing, especially to those that are not regular users that haven't figured, you know, the rules and regs out. So certainly important for us to look ahead on that. Thanks.
Julie, you want to go ahead if there's none of the other directors that wanted to add on that?
Sure, I'll jump in. So I really appreciate, you know, Phil's recommendation. Really, if there's anything that we could do to actually try and, you know, reduce this fare, because and what Troy was talking about, the whole system makes absolutely no sense logically. And the fact that our community, the city of Northglenn, our one stop, you know, has to be a regional fare doesn't make sense either. And I know that, you know, the equity analysis could, you know, prove to be in favor or not favor, but, you know, when you're looking at my particular community, you know, there's no reason why the citizens of Northglenn should have a regional fare and have to pay more. I mean, we have a lot of people of color in this community. We have a lower income bracket. So there's no reason at all that our city should be included in this. And so I think that goes back to the original question when we first talked about the pilot, is that, you know, why is it that, you know, some cities are included and some cities are not? And why did, you know, these final two stops actually be included in the first place? And essentially, and maybe I was wrong, but I felt like it was, oh, well, it makes the numbers work. So when you have to charge these two communities or these two last stops, you know, extra to pay for, you know, operations or something like that, but it helps make the numbers work. And so, like, that just isn't a good enough, I think, explanation, especially for, you know, our city when we only have one stop. And so I feel like it's just been really confusing and something that I'm glad that you guys are bringing up an overall ridership action plan, because I know that has been a huge discussion with RTD Accountability Committee, is just fares overall. So I know that the problem is being discussed. I know that, you know, there's a lot of people who are encouraging and working towards a better system, but it's just unfortunate that, you know, we got into this mess in the first place. The pilot fare program was great. It was a great opportunity for us to get some great data. Unfortunately, COVID happened, and now we're just kind of stuck with, you know, not really a way to move forward. And so I think, you know, just frustration overall, and is just what I'm feeling. And I mean, anything that any of the directors have or anyone else on this call, any opportunities of further discussion, you know, of how we could try and reduce the fares with these last two stops, I am open to new ideas, anything. So thank you, Phil, for bringing that forward. And then, yes, directors, if you guys have anything that you think you need from us, specifically the city of Northglenn or Thornton, since those are our stops, you know, let us know how we could support you or do any type of advocacy in any way to help, you know, reduce these fares. Thanks.
And Vince or Eric, if you want to answer some of that, and then I've got some questions in the chat as well.
Great. Eric, did you want to go first, or it's up to you?
Go ahead, Vince.
Okay, so I'll get back to the promotional fare pilot program and the buy-up of the fare zone concept. And yeah, we'd be happy to do that. And we do it in a lot of communities. Longmont does it. I think Boulder. There's a number of communities that contribute their own funds to either reduce fares or increase services. And happy to do it. When we did the promotional fare pilot program in the end of 2019. The numbers that we were given by staff indicated that for the 6-month time frame of the program, we would be losing roughly $180,000 in fare. So arguably, using that number, that would be the buy-up that you would need to continue that program. It wouldn't be a pilot fare program. We couldn't call it that, call it something different. But to buy those fares up for 6 months. But that was based on the ridership numbers, that we had projected back then. And, the ridership numbers are lower. So my guess is the fare buy-up might be a lower number as well. But yeah, Thornton and North Glen, if we can talk about that, we'd be happy to talk about doing something like that and keeping that moving. The other questions Councilmember Mullica raised, I think, relate more to the fare zone discussion. And I'm happy to talk about those now if we're going to move into that.
Maybe Eric has something to add before we move into that.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, thanks, Vince. And thank you to everybody for the comments. I did just want to also add that, in addition to the Accountability Committee, we're also kicking off the Reimagine RTD initiative. And that was brought up at this past Tuesday, and the working group will be coming back together. I'm personally very excited to be on that working group. And one of the things that I'm also excited about is the conversation is increasingly centering around customer experience and improving the customer experience across our system holistically. And I think fares are a huge part of that. And I've had operators tell me that even in some cases with how complex fares are on the bus service, that sometimes they just will give up on making sure they're getting the proper fare from different individuals. And so the complexity of our fare system, I think, is a huge problem. And I really appreciate hearing all of that feedback. I think Reimagine RTD gives us a great opportunity to address that, in addition to recommendations we expect to see from the Accountability Committee. So I just wanted to make sure to highlight that we will be kicking that initiative off again, and any and all ideas are welcome. And then secondarily, on the Reimagine campaign, I do expect us to also be talking a lot about partnerships, which is going to be another one of our fundamental guiding principles. So, Phil, thank you for the idea and the feedback there. I think RTD owes it to the community to be more responsive on those types of ideas. So let's start those conversations and carry them into the Reimagine campaign. I did also just want to address, not to derail the conversation, but along those lines, I did see a conversation in the chat, I believe from Karen, about what we're doing, about those operator shortages that led to the problem this morning. And did just also want to mention, we're going to be, we're going through a peer review of the state audit, which highlighted some of those issues. As vice chair of our Finance and Audit Committee, I did get a chance to get a look at some of where we're going with this. I'm very excited about the peer review we're doing with APTA. We have some real heavy hitters on that peer review. I think that will help us identify some issues that can be solved. So no answers now, but again, another thing that as we head into Reimagine RTD, as we go through peer reviews of our audits, and as we benefit from the new leadership that we have, with CEO and General Manager Johnson, I think there's some opportunities for improvement there. So anyway, I spoke for a little while, but thank you very much for all the comments. Took some good notes here, and look forward to working with you all as we go to Reimagine. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. And so it looks like the other question in the chat was about, could there be another pilot program after this with the same fares? And so maybe this buy-up or pilot opportunity, I don't know what that looks like. I do see that we also have Kevin Vargas from Congressman Crow's office on the line. So we do have our 4 representatives on the line with us from the federal level. And so I really would like to have them make sure that this information is going up to our representatives and how they can help us, how we can partner together, because it does sound like this is bigger than just a regional issue. And if we can get their help with getting this local fare or a lower fare in general, I think we're all open to that kind of partnership and communication.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Vince.
With regard to the continue doing another pilot fare program, short answer is no. Can't do that. So then you would avoid the requirement of an equity analysis by simply doing pilot fare, pilot program, and that wouldn't go over with anybody. So yeah, the issue with the 6-month pilot program is that you do not need an equity analysis. You can use it for statistical analysis, and you don't need to do a detailed equity. You go months, want to change a fare, you have to do a detailed equity analysis, see who's being impacted by the change.
And so Chris from Adams County has a good question about, is the buy-up program eligible for federal aid through DRCOG? And then the local governments could maybe share the match?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so maybe it looks like there's several things we can be thinking of. Troy, did you have a comment?
I just to see if Chris or anybody could answer the DRCOG question. Great question. We will check into that. Certainly worth exploration. So thanks, Chris, for bringing that. It sounds like Phil said he's not had too much luck with that, but yeah, and Kristen as well. So yeah, thanks for the input, everybody. Very thoughtful.
All right, let's keep moving then with the next piece of this, which is the general fare zones, I guess. And it sounds like March 9th, is that what I heard? There will be a discussion on growth ridership action plan. Is that what I heard from Shelley?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what she.
And Madam Chair, if I,
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Vince.
Thanks, Director Cook. Yeah, and again, a little bit of history. So again, just before the pandemic, and coincidentally or not, right after the promotional fare pilot program was adopted, we, RTD, began looking at this issue of fare zones and how can we, work on eliminating them, or doing something different that makes it easier, because the way you attract people to transit is you make it simple and you make it reasonable in terms of price. And I agree with all the people that have been saying this is too complicated, and it is. When Deborah Johnson came on, I challenged her to leave her RTD ID at home and get on a bus and a train and figure it out and make some transfers and see how difficult it is. And I think she sees that it is. She's been out there quite a lot. So, we were having this discussion about eliminating these fare zones, making things simpler than the pandemic hit. And we were just trying to tread water. But now we're getting back into this, and I know the board and a number of us are pushing again to get back to this discussion about what we can do to simplify things and make things more reasonable. So, and Councilmember Malka, you indicated, why is North Glen in the regional fare zone? Well, that's because, yeah, I'm sure there was a financial analysis that went into this. And some time ago, before any of these current directors were on the board, someone drew some circles on a map and said, if you're within the circle, you're local, and if you're outside, you're regional. So, there were, certainly a financial analysis involved in that. So it's time to take another look at this again.
We need a magic circle pen to like reroute.
Eraser.
Madam Chair, I can't get my hand to go up, but I'd just like to say, because we're joined by our congressional reps, I want to make sure they understand what the difference is between a local fare and a regional fare. It's $3 local fare and it's $5.25 regional fare. So what Councilmember Mullica is saying is you've got a community, North Glen, because you live in North Glen, you are paying now $2.25 more to take transit than you would if you were just on the other side of this circle that was drawn to decide where the regions were. And I think part of that was because the N line hadn't been built yet, and they were trying to figure out how to do this. And Carson's got another slide that shows Southern RTD fare zones as well. It's not just us that are affected by this. If you do something, Carson, you'll see that this is really hard for me to see on mine, but you can see there's a whole section in the South that also has this dilemma. And so to fix this fare zone issue would help with other communities as well, not just our North End. Just wanted to make sure everyone realized it's a significant difference between local fare and regional fare. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing these slides. And so do we have any other questions or comments about the fare conversation, the fare zones? I don't see any other hands up or any comments in the chat box. I appreciate all of the directors coming on. I know this is a complicated issue and it's been going on for a while, and the work that you guys have done to advocate for us has been really helpful, and I know we all really appreciate it. I know it's not an easy task to deal with, so I do see Kevin is thanking everyone. I guess just keeping us all in the loop, and I'm very grateful that we have such great representation up here fighting for us, and so many of us on this coalition on different committees and boards. So it's not just this group that we're hearing it in. And so with that, I think Julie, you're up next on the agenda.
Sounds good. All right. So there's a couple slides that I had Dr. Cox's staff help just collect. Now, a lot of these slides are just recycled from other presentations they've had. So I think it's just to provide us a good just overview of the RTD Accountability Committee and where we are to date. So next slide. So just taking a step back, these are the committee members, and the whole purpose of the committee was to have diverse representation of folks with different expertise. And so you could get an idea here of who has been participating in these conversations. And then, of course, we had Lynn and Troy join us from the RTD board members, or from the RTD board. So it's been great to have them and their input in this process. Next slide. So overall, the mission was to provide and set some recommendations for improvement to operations and statutes related to RTD pertaining to the board staff. And this was really just kind of our overall mission. Now, it's definitely kind of, it was a huge charge if you think about it. This is a very broad charge, like go forth and create these recommendations. And so it's been an interesting process to see how each committee has tried to kind of hone down on what are some of the important issues. So next slide. And I'll talk about those in just a second. So here's our timeline. You know, we started last July. We had a preliminary report that could have been released in December, but came later in January. And then we're actually supposed to wrap up by July. So when you think about it, it's a pretty short time frame. It's only a year. And one thing that kind of hit us, especially towards, I don't know, December-ish, is just how quickly time flies by. And so it really helped us, I think, again, focus, narrow down our list on things that we're able to really address. And then, of course, within 45 days of issuance of the final report, which will be in July, RTD board must either adopt the recommendation or issue a report stating its reasons not for adopting the specific recommendation. So that will be the process after we're done and we submit our final report. Next slide. So there's 3 committees. There's governance, finance, and operations. I'm chairing the governance committee. Thank you. And so some of the things that we are focusing on are, our big one is actually a kind of a sub-regional, regional governance structure. And so one of the most important things about this is, you know, the problem we are trying to solve: how can local governments and, you know, local communities really get involved kind of on the front end when it comes to service planning and addressing their specific transportation needs. And so I feel like the way the current process works, you know, RTD makes their decisions, especially around service planning, and then communities are kind of forced to react to those changes or to whatever it is RTD planned. And so the purpose of kind of like a sub-regional forum would be to actually bring that input towards the beginning. And I want to specify, we're not just talking about local electeds, right? We really want to make sure that we're getting more of a community voice. And so membership of these groups could include, you know, local business leaders. It should and definitely will include transit riders. So actually people who ride transit. It's an innovative thought, right? So we should get their feedback and their opinions on what best ways to serve them. Local governments will be important to this conversation as well, but it's really a community discussion about the transportation needs in that region. And so we're working on, you know, creating a recommendation around that. We're finalizing our kind of recommendation, if you will. And, you know, given the sense that this is a one-year committee, of course, our recommendations are going to be higher level. A lot of it is going to require a heck of a lot more work when it comes to planning, structuring, figuring out the financial sides of things. So it is just more of a recommendation of RTD should study this, they should consider this moving forward, and then there's just so much work on the back end that would need to happen on this. So our other topic we're going to be talking about is partnerships with other transit agencies and nonprofits, right? Again, how do we introduce flexibility into meeting the needs of the residents that we have? I think that that's probably one of the most important things that we're trying to accomplish. How do we just serve our community better? And then we're also having conversations about RTD service committee or service areas, and then the size and structure of the RTD board. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. And really, as these bullets line up, is really kind of our to-do list moving forward. So the size and structure of the RTD board conversation is going to be happening more towards, I think, May-ish timeline. So next slide. Here's the finance subcommittee. And so I try and attend these meetings as much as possible, but it's tough to fit them all in. So I appreciate Troy and Lynn for really kind of being on the ball, and they're always in these meetings. I always see them. So thank you so much for taking these on. It's important that your perspective is heard. So for the finance subcommittee, they're looking at more of a sustainable financial model. They did a huge dive into the COVID-19 relief funds and how those were used. And really, there was nothing significant that they found there. They are reviewing the RTD statutes, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then talking about the resolution of unfinished fast track corridors, which is an important conversation for us. Covering financial transparency, and again, the opportunities for partnership to enhance mobility services. That's a conversation that's going to be happening among all 3 subcommittees, and so we're going to try and do that jointly. Next slide. Operations has been super busy, and they have a fantastic leader, and so they've been focusing a lot on the fares and the pass programs, which has been really, I think, a robust conversation. They're also looking at service delivery for transit-reliant populations, community-based transit service planning and operations. Again, there's a little bit of an overlap there. Organizational assessment, and then social and environmental justice and equity analysis, which I think has just been not only just a fantastic conversation, but I'm really excited about the recommendations that are going to be coming out of the operations committee. Next slide. So we did have a preliminary report that was released in January, and it really covered just information about the committees, a status report for each subcommittee. So we have a plan of just the kind of final topics that we're going to be covering. Doug Rex, he put it a good way. If it's in the preliminary plan, that's what we're going to have a conversation on. If it's not, then we can't cover it. And so we had to be really specific about what we could try and accomplish over the next couple of months. Because again, it is very limited time. And then we had proposed legislative recommendations for this legislative session. So next slide. This is the legislative recommendations. This was obviously important to get out sooner. And so a lot more work happened on this sooner rather than later, of course, to capitalize on the legislative session that's currently in place. So some of the things that they wanted to cover was the fare box ratio requirements, parking fees, commercial and residential uses at stations, and then contracting with local governments and nonprofits. So a lot of that language you could find specifically in the preliminary report, but we had to get those out to capitalize on the legislative session. So that was a very quick overview of what's going on with the RTD Accountability Committee. I think that moving forward, if we want to do another update next month, I think that especially the sub-regional recommendations should be finalized, which would be great. I'm praying we need to move on here in our subcommittee. And so I'm trying to get that wrapped up so that we can move on to some other bigger things. But any other recommendations that are trying to come together, maybe I could bring that back to you guys next month, just so you guys get an idea of some of those initial recommendations as they come out of these groups. Any questions?
Julie, it looks like Joan had a question about the size of local buses. Is that part of the conversation?
So I know that they've been talking a lot about size related to the needs of folks who use wheelchairs, specific to that. I'm not sure about the actual sizes of local buses. I know that that's come up in a couple different conversations, but I'm not quite sure if it's going to end up in a final recommendation from the operations committee. But Joan, I could follow up with Dea and ask her what her conversations have been like with that.
Okay, thanks, Julie.
And I think it's a good idea if we do have an update each month, especially since there's only a few months left on the accountability. So yeah, let's make sure we get it. We'll get that as an update each month. All right, for the sake of time, I'm going to keep moving because we've got about 23 minutes left. So if we have questions, maybe just type them into the chat box and we can make sure we get those to Julie. And so it looks like the next item is the doodle poll on the NATA retreat.
I'm going to launch a poll, Madam Chair, for NATA retreat dates. You guys can fill it out. Let me know if you don't see it.
I see it on there.
Good.
And so I think reminding people that next month on Thursday, the 25th, this would just be after the NATA meeting, while the other ones would be after the week, the prior Friday morning meeting, the strategic planning meeting that we have before the NATA. And so maybe none of these work, but if we could just quickly fill that out and submit it, that would be helpful so we can try to get the retreat on the calendar. And then I'm going to go ahead and tee up our CML legislative update from Megan McKillop. And thank you, Megan, for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for having me. I won't take up too much time, but I just wanted to thank everyone for having me here to provide a quick update on this legislative session so far. There hasn't been a ton of transportation-related legislation that's come through. One that CML is supporting is Senate Bill, Senate Bill 84. That's being heard in committee on the 9th. It is a bill that would grant local governments more authority over roughed-in roads, which are roads that have been prepped but don't qualify as technical roads. So we're going ahead and supporting that, and we'll be testifying in committee when that's heard on the 9th. other than that, there's the main issue we're following, as you all probably know, is transportation funding and the development of that legislation. We've been in a few meetings with legislative leadership, and we co-hosted an event on Monday. I know some of you are at that event. As you know, I think that it's the same story. The details of the legislation are pretty tight under wraps, but we do know that they're going to raise revenue through fees, a gas fee that would be an augmentation of the current gas tax, a user fee that would be directed at Amazon delivery vehicles, Uber and Lyft, share rides, things of that nature, and an electric vehicle fee. The distribution of any new revenue is still up in the air, but it's CML's position that any revenue that would be directed or flow through the HUTF should maintain the historic funding formula, the 60, 22, 18% that we've seen in previous years. So as details come out about that bill, I'm sure we'll all be in touch about that. And I am the main transportation contact, as you may know. So if you have any questions, please just send them my way. The one other thing I wanted to touch base with everyone about is the an update about Revitalizing Main Streets funding. The governor has mentioned some approved funding for Revitalizing Main Streets and the Safer Main Streets program. JBC approved $30 million in a supplemental bill that's going through the Senate currently. And I was able to talk to someone at CDOT about these two grant programs and got some more clarification on what those look like. They're basically combining the two programs for all intents and purposes, and that would free up more money to go to local governments who want to apply for these grants to improve their main streets and downtown areas. So currently the Revitalizing Main Street grant program is capped at a $50,000 project, but I was assured that that cap will be raised. And details about these new applications and the new way to apply for these grants will be released in March. And I am working with CDOT to compile some information about that. And we plan to send it out to all of CML's members. And I'm happy to forward it along to you all as well. So that is all I have. If you have any questions, just let me know. And I can share my email in the chat as well. So feel free to contact me anytime.
And it looks like Phil had a question in the chat box. Do you know when the Safer Main Streets caps will be raised?
Once the legislation is signed by the governor, that at that point will they'll be able to award a higher dollar amount for grant projects. And I was told it would be the end of March, possibly April, but I've been working very closely with CDOT. I just had a meeting with them Tuesday, and we're going to be sure to get all of that information to our local governments as soon as it's available.
Thank you, Megan. Any other questions for Megan? I don't see any. Well, thanks, Megan. I hope that we can, especially during the session, count on you to come and give us these updates. I think it's helpful for us to know where things are and we can ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you. And it looks like Carrie has put contact information also in the chat box for Senator Hickenlooper's office. All right, and so moving on, we've got one final presentation about the Colorado 7 Corridor Coalition.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Hi, thanks for having me today. I'm Ryan Sorensen with CDOT. I'm a Region 1 resident engineer, and State Highway 7 is one of the highways that falls within my area. So I just want to give you a little update as to where we're at and progressing the corridor forward. I know there's a lot of interest in this corridor, so if you could just go ahead and just go right into the next slide. So the background on this corridor is that a lot of work has been done basically up to this point. A number of studies, actions already to this point in other plans. For instance, there's a PEL, preliminary environmental linkage study done on the west side, basically from 75th to 287, and then another PEL on the Region 1 side, 287 to US 85, and then an East Arapahoe transportation plan. If you could flip to the next one, it shows some of these other ones as well. Okay, so we did a BRT sponsored by the coalition, the State Highway 7 Coalition. There's a BRT feasibility study, station area plans where's the best location to put the transit stations throughout the corridor to best serve the community. And then what we did is the city of Broomfield put together a regional application to DRCOG to get funding for some level of preliminary engineering funding. So we were granted a $10 million preliminary environmental and engineering project, basically funding for that, sponsored by Broomfield and then managed by CDOT. So what we are doing now is a first step of that is putting together this corridor development plan. We have a very multimodal vision and focus throughout the corridor. That includes making sure as the roadway is advanced, we keep that we keep the infrastructure in mind to implement BRT, such as shoulder running, BRT prioritization through intersections, through queue jump lanes, and making sure we build our islands accordingly, and then deploy technology in order to support that as we go forward. And so, yeah, if you could, also keeping in mind bicycle and multi-use path, pedestrian connectivity, making sure that we understand what the microtransit and sort of some of the local, what the local circulation is going to look like in order to access the highway and then access off of the highway, and working together with RTD. So if you could go to the next slide. Yep, so I mentioned we had a $10 million project. It became evident early on as to, okay, we have a 25-mile corridor. Essentially, the desire would be to get preliminary engineering completely throughout the corridor. However, $10 million it stretches pretty thin, I guess, as you go over 25 miles. So, how do you best expend that money? We worked with all of the, if you could just go ahead. And one important point I'd like to put out is that we excluded the mobility hub as a part of this. That is on its separate track. We acknowledge in the corridor development plan that we are tying into the hub, and a little bit of discussion just related to making sure we are coordinating with that effort at the same time, I-25, but this project specifically excluded that, but we'll be tying into it. And of course, CDOT pushing that effort forward has close coordination on that. So if you could go to the next slide. So the purpose of the corridor development plan was to look at how to best deliver those dollars. How do we make sure that all the 8 member communities that are involved in the corridor that are put in funding for this $10 million project, how do we best equitably distribute the funds and push forward a design? The idea behind what we are doing is to make sure that we have preliminary design that can be used as a springboard for other efforts that go forward in the future. So as funding becomes available, we will be positioned to best move the corridor forward, sort of as the baseline or the basis for quickly being able to mobilize into from a 15% design, which ultimately the goal is 15% design, moving to final design. And then also have a better understanding as the corridor develops for, let's say, developers, to give them what the roadway will look like, the toes of slope. We'll have a better understanding of where maybe we're going to do an initial noise study, look at where noise walls might go throughout the corridor and things of that nature. So we have a good understanding and everybody can have sort of their eyes on the preliminary design. And that springs us into quickly developing the corridor as funding becomes available. Yeah, so what we did is the corridor development plan basically it was a 6-month intensive project. If you could go to the next slide, please. We included these are the members of the Technical Advisory Committee, which is a subcommittee of the State Highway 7 Coalition. It was a 6-month intensive process from approximately June 2020 to December of 2020. And then it was endorsed by the State Highway 7 Coalition at the January 29th meeting. So that was sort of the cap of the corridor development plan. This is a slide that just shows who the participants are that we actively engaged with throughout the process. We did actively engage with RTD, Smart Commute, Commuting Solutions, and other Northwest Chamber Alliance and other interested parties throughout the process. So it was very collaborative. I think we definitely got a good product out of that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the goals we can see here as part of the corridor development plan. Obviously, we have a very multimodal focus as we advance the corridor. We want to make sure we address the current needs. Obviously, there's current congestion, and as the corridor develops over time, we want to make sure we're focusing on breaking down those barriers while at the same time having the larger vision in mind and fitting with developing the corridor to fit within that vision. So plan and prepare for the future, complement existing planned infrastructure, leverage joint opportunities. We did a screening process based on those first 5 goals, and that allows us to get to a list of, we call them proposed actions, but I don't want to get confused with environmental, proposed sort of sub projects to our project. And then we had to re-baseline it based on equity and sort of the amount of funding in other considerations that people that the member communities contributed to this project. So I think a big part I want to emphasize is that there is a big focus on the fact that it's rapid. The corridor is rapidly developing with different communities and stores and so forth coming in, and we want to make sure that we're best optimizing that work and leveraging those opportunities, either for setting aside right of way or getting segments of the road constructed by outside parties. All right, if we could go to the next one. Okay, so this is a little bit too much, probably too much detail, but here's how we broke it up. We applied the goals to this, went through a screening process, and that helped us to decide, what do we best do with the funding. We're moving forward with basically right now, I'm putting together a team internally, and then we're putting together a procurement plan that's on the next steps. But and we're doing a staffing and procurement plan to best decide how to deliver this. We have to knock down basically the current unknowns. For instance, in segment B, we still need to decide on the typical section, which defines how the roadway is going to look. We still need to nail that down. So we're piecing together parts of that. What can we advance into design and actually get our designers to start writing down on paper? And then what other elements do we need to make sure we settle prior to moving into design? So we're working out those components and scheduling each one of them right now. So, well, I'm going to say that the first thing we're going to do is run. I don't want to get into too much engineering, but just sort of horizontal and vertical alignments, run our backbone along the whole corridor, and then do more detailed design in the segments or the portions that we have identified here. All right, next slide. Okay, so here's the outcome. This one and the next slide show actual planning level dollars. I'm careful to say it's planning level. It's a basis of cost comparison, but we are going to move forward into design similar to what I just described, where we're going to launch and get into actual start developing to where we'll have plan sheets. You can see the segments here without going over each one of them. We're looking at these levels of cost basically to get that preliminary level of, I mentioned 15% design. I think we can get a little bit higher percentage, just depends on how you define 15%. But we will move the corridor into preliminary design. So if you can go to the next one. The next one is really just another cost comparison for elements that we need to push forward. Basically, we have a number of elements that we are going to have to procure outside resources. And that's what we're looking at figuring out right now, defining scopes of work and what our plan is going to be to help us knock down those, to help define the unknown elements of the project, and then also move it forward. For instance, making sure we have a good communication plan, getting a communications manager on board so that we can have a consistent message throughout and help to manage each of the member communities throughout in the message that they're putting forward as the corridor develops. So if we could go to the next slide. All right, so this is a schedule. Basically, just high level, we should be going fully in design mid this year, 2021. We're in a staffing and procurement process right now. We'll get the actual design going in the coming months. My plan is to have most of the project really wrapped up by mid 2023 with all of the basically the 15% designs ready on the shelf to make available to the member communities. In the member communities, we will have constant basic contact throughout. We will meet. We've been working really well very well as a team. So if we could go to the next slide. Okay, communications management, as I mentioned, is very important, and making sure that everyone is moving forward with the same messages and having that coordination there. So if we can go to the next one. Another important part that was an output of the corridor development plan is we're looking at various ways to how do you best develop the corridor over time. So one thing, this needs to be developed further, and we will get into that as we go into actual design, but we will, as money becomes available, how do you best develop the corridor to fit the multimodal vision at the same time, making sure we can clear up congestion. So we have narrative on a few different scenarios, and really it's a mix of those scenarios. So you have to develop, how do you best develop north-south and east-west over time, really? So that's what we looked at and we will be looking at. So, we have 3 scenarios that we worked out, which is a BRT scenario, choke point scenario, or operational continuity. Operational continuity has to do with, there's sections of road that 2-lane, 1 lane, 2 lane, 1 lane, 2 lane type of thing. How do you break down those barriers to make sure you create a continuity? Choke points obviously would be more of like the intersections and so forth, and making sure that we mitigate congestion through those. And then BRT, keeping the BRT vision in mind. How do you develop the corridor to best advance BRT as, I guess, ridership and land use density, it fills in and starts to support that. So if you could go to the next one. And that'll be developed further. Really, the next steps, I've said most of it throughout the presentation, but we're looking at staffing, procurement, right now in moving those items forward. One of the first things I'm hoping next week I can actually execute a task order to do an aerial and a mobile LiDAR throughout the whole corridor, which will help set up a survey base, basically a survey platform throughout the whole corridor, and then future projects will be able to spring off of this survey information. And then I don't have an estimated timeline, but we are working on our PR, the Region 1, CDOT Region 1 PR department is working on a website, and we will then post everything to this website, and it'll move into getting a communications manager on board from there. So questions and discussion. So thanks for your time. I tried to keep the time reasonable. So I apologize if I went too fast.
No, thanks, Ryan. That was a good overview on that. It's a big project, also very important to this group and the region as a whole. So I appreciate the information. Any questions for Ryan at this time? Ryan, I think if we could just get updates as things are happening,
Yeah,
that would be really
absolutely.
helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and just a next step too that I didn't mention, I used this coalition update from the 29th in order to let you know where we're at. But we'll be meeting with the State Highway 7 Coalition TAC, which is all 8-member communities and others, every other month throughout 2021. And then we will also, of course, be closely in tie with the State Highway 7 Coalition and following their lead and guidance throughout this process. So thanks for the opportunity to give you an update.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
All right. Yes.
Madam, this is Steve
Commissioner.
Odorizio. I just wanted to say we think that was an outstanding presentation. Recently, I don't even know if it's public, but I'm going to say one of our colleagues got in an accident on State Highway 7. I think it's important for us to keep pushing this particular project, the Brighton to Boulder corridor, simply because there's so much that needs to be done there. And so I'm very optimistic and emboldened by this presentation, and I appreciate everyone's efforts on it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Odorizio. All right, and so our federal level reminder is just if we're applying for any federal funds, reach out for a letter of support. We appreciate that. Carson, do you have any updates on the poll?
I do. I'm happy to share the results here. Just a few votes.
So it looks like that Friday after the SPC, the 16th from 9 to 11.
Seems to be.
Okay, so let's have a discussion about that maybe at our next SPC meeting and work out the details. Okay, well, with that, I want to thank everyone for your time today. I think we had some really great discussions, good questions, and sounds like some ideas that might work for the N-line as far as the local fair goes. But look forward to seeing everyone next month, which is also on the 25th of March. And everyone stay warm and have a great day. Thank you.